There is a night sky that belongs to no particular time, a sky untouched by memory, heavy with quiet stars. Beneath it, the earth turns slowly, patient and old, as though it has seen every secret and grown tired of telling them. In that darkness, a listener might imagine the steady pulse of the planet, the rhythm of oceans, the whisper of wind across stone, the faint tremor of mountains as they breathe. It is the sound of a world that remembers almost everything. Almost. Because somewhere within the great archive of stone and ice, the earth hesitates. There is a pause, a blank page in its autobiography. 600,000 years where the story fades. Geologists call it a discontinuity, a gap, a missing layer. To the rest of us, it is simply a silence. A place where time itself seems to have stepped aside. Imagine holding an ancient core of ice. It gleams under laboratory light like a column of frozen glass. Within it lie the ghosts of climates long vanished. Dust from Sahara storms that blew tens of millennia ago. Pollen from forests that no longer exist. Trapped air that once filled the lungs of mammoths. Each bubble, each layer tells a year, a season, a heartbeat. Yet in some cores, between one layer and the next, the record stops. The ages above and below remain, but the middle is gone, pressed out, melted, erased. Scientists trace Earth's memory with astonishing precision. They can read temperature shifts from the tilt of isotopes, magnetic reversals from the iron in basalt, even volcanic winters from layers of microscopic ash. Billions of years unfold beneath their instruments, unfolding like an ancient scroll. But then comes this interval, 600,000 years of fog. A time when data falters, when the planet's pulse drops from the record. Some call it a geological curiosity, others, a profound reminder of how little permanence exists, even in stone. Because if time can disappear from the Earth itself, what hope do our own fragile memories have? Picture for a moment the world as it might have looked before the silence began. Continents drifted in familiar shapes. Ice sheets crept down from the poles, receding and advancing like the slow tide of eternity. Primitive humans had not yet spoken their first words, but the Earth was already writing its story in dust and lava and ocean floor. Then, somewhere in that unfolding script, the ink ran dry. The scientists who first noticed it were not searching for mysteries. They were drilling, measuring, cataloguing, the quiet rituals of those who read deep time. But as the samples came up, layer after layer, they found what should not exist, a void between two certainties. Above, clear signs of climate and life. Below, equally clear. Between them, nothing. As if 600 millennia had been gently lifted from the surface and set aside. It is tempting to think of such a gap as destruction, cataclysm, fire, flood. But the evidence does not scream of disaster. It hums softly of erasure, of something subtler. Wind, perhaps, grinding away the record. Glaciers folding layers upon themselves, until the years merged into one another, indistinguishable. The Earth's handwriting, smudged by its own restless hands. When we stare into this absence, what we really confront is the fragility of continuity. We like to imagine that history, whether written by humans or by nature, is unbroken, that one moment leads seamlessly to the next. But the planet teaches otherwise. Even it, vast and ancient, forgets. Somewhere beneath the Arctic ice, there is a boundary where the instruments fall silent. Somewhere in the ocean floor, there is a seam where sediment skips ahead, as though 600,000 years were too heavy to bear. Somewhere in the stones of an eroded valley, time has simply fallen away, and yet the quiet is beautiful, because within it lies possibility. A missing chapter invites imagination. It lets us wonder what the world might have been. A landscape half known, populated by creatures we'll never name, climates that flickered and vanished before they could leave a mark. Perhaps mountains rose and fell, perhaps rivers carved paths that no longer exist, perhaps nothing extraordinary happened at all, only the slow breathing of a planet turning in its sleep. There is comfort in that thought, that forgetting can be gentle, that not every silence hides catastrophe. Sometimes it is simply the hush between heartbeats. Still, scientists cannot rest in unknowing. They dig deeper, chase older signals, trace magnetism through volcanic glass, measure isotopes with tools delicate enough to weigh the age of dust. Each discovery edges closer to the truth, yet the gap remains, a dark seam across the ledger of time. The term they use for such gaps is hiatus. It sounds harmless, like a pause in a song, a breath taken before the next verse. But in geological terms, a hiatus can swallow entire civilizations that never had the chance to exist. 600,000 years is not a blink. It is an empire of moments, gone without trace. Consider what might have lived then. Early ancestors of modern humans perhaps wandered in small groups, their tools rough, their fires uncertain. Mammals we no longer recognize grazed across plains now buried under ice. The planet's magnetic poles flickered, the climate trembled on the edge of transformation. And through it all, time moved, yet somehow left no record of its passing. It is easy to imagine the Earth as eternal and solid, but listen closely and you can hear its quiet instability. Mountains crumble, seas rise, crust slides beneath crust, turning stone back into molten memory. Nothing is truly permanent, not even time itself when recorded in matter that refuses to stay still. If one could stand at the edge of that vanished era, what would one see? Perhaps nothing remarkable. A horizon of pale light, clouds drifting, wind curling dust along the ground. The same sun we know, the same moon, the same slow seasons. And yet, every moment of it now lost. Every breath swallowed by the turning of layers that forgot to harden. There is a kind of humility in realizing that the Earth does not owe us its past. It keeps what it wishes, releases the rest. Our tools, our theories, our equations, all they can do is listen. And in that listening, something tender happens. We stop demanding answers, and instead, we hear the rhythm beneath the silence. Somewhere beneath the ice, beneath the dust, there's a pause so vast it feels deliberate, a heartbeat missing from the story of time. It invites the imagination not toward fear, but toward wonder, because what is a mystery if not an act of trust? The Earth has hidden something, and we are meant to search for it, not to conquer it. Think of all the stories that exist only because of what we don't know. The lost civilizations we dream of, the creatures we sketch from bones, the eras we name by fragments of stone. Absence gives shape to curiosity, silence to listening. When the first explorers of deep time realized how ancient the world truly was, they felt awe and something like vertigo. Now, confronted with a void within that immensity, we feel something similar. A recognition that knowledge, no matter how complete, still drifts on an ocean of unknowing. Perhaps that is why bedtime stories of history soothe us. They remind us that mystery is not an enemy of truth, but its companion. That even in forgetting there is beauty, and that sometimes, to understand the Earth, we must first accept its silences. So let us linger here, at the threshold of absence. Let the stars above remind us that even light takes time to arrive. That what we see is already memory. Let the air be still, the world hushed, as if listening with us. The scientists will keep searching, through layers of rock, through isotopic whispers, through the faint magnetism of ancient lava. But for tonight, it is enough simply to know the question exists. How can time itself disappear? And in that question, to find a strange and gentle peace. Because the silence between the years is not empty after all. It is filled with the quiet promise that there will always be more to learn, more to wonder, more to dream. The story begins with a sound, low, rhythmic, and patient. The hum of a drill biting through ice that has not seen daylight for 1,000,000 years. It echoes across the frozen plain of Greenland, carried by winds so dry they whisper like paper. Around the drill, scientists move slowly, their breaths crystallizing in the pale light, their motions deliberate, as if afraid to disturb the memories sleeping beneath their feet. Every turn of the auger brings up a ribbon of time. The ice rises in long, translucent columns, each band a thin signature of snowfall compressed by centuries. To the untrained eye, the core looks like nothing, clear, fragile, ordinary. But under the blue lamps of the field tent, it glows faintly, streaked with subtle rings of white and grey. Each layer is a page from the planet's diary. Volcanic ash, sea salt, cosmic dust, the faint traces of pollen carried by winds from continents far away. It is the closest thing to time made visible. For weeks, the team drills, catalogues, labels. The ice cores are measured, sealed, and lowered into insulated cases like precious scrolls. Everything proceeds with the ritual calm of scientific routine, until one day, the layers begin to misbehave. A technician leans over a section of core, adjusting the light. He frowns. The rings that should be there, the rhythmic alternation of winter and summer snowfall, are missing. Instead of a steady pattern, there is a sudden jump, thousands of years gone between one segment and the next. It is as if the ice has skipped a verse in its song. At first they assume error. Perhaps the drill skipped. Perhaps the depth measurement is wrong. But when the data from other sites arrives, the same gap appears again and again. Different cores, different regions, same absence. A hole in time, repeating like a whisper across the poles. Later, in warmer laboratories far from the ice, the mystery deepens. Geologists and paleoclimatologists examine rock strata from distant continents, sediment beds laid down in the same general age, between roughly 900,000 and 300,000 years ago. And there too, the record falters. Layers thin unexpectedly or vanish outright. Sediment that should be a neat chronology of ocean chemistry suddenly jumps, like a film reel missing frames. Somewhere in that span of 600 millennia, the planet seems to have stopped recording its own existence. They name it, quietly, the time hole. Not a technical term, but one whispered among researchers who have stared too long at graphs that refuse to make sense. Between one epoch and another, the data dissolves. No catastrophe announces itself, no asteroid impact, no mass extinction. Only the eerie quiet of geological amnesia. Imagine the scene within the research camp when the realization first takes hold. The generators thrum, filling the tent with a constant low vibration. Outside, the wind scours the snow into ridges that gleam beneath the moon. Inside, a group of scientists gathers around a table where an ice core lies cradled in foam. Their voices are hushed. They trace gloved fingers along its length, measuring, comparing. They know the figures too well to be mistaken. The gap is real, one of them murmurs half to herself. It's like time folded. No one laughs. When we think of geological time, we imagine continuity, one layer forming upon another, each a perfect record of what came before. But the Earth's archives are not perfect. They are written in materials that move and melt, shift and erode. The sea reclaims its sediment. The wind scrapes valleys clean. Tectonic plates swallow and recycle entire chapters of crust. Still, such erasure usually leaves traces, scratches, fractures, unconformities visible to the trained eye. This gap, though, is smooth, too smooth, as if the planet itself had quietly edited its past. In the labs of Copenhagen, Tokyo, and Colorado, data streams flicker across computer screens. Graphs climb, drop, and then flatline. Magnetic signatures vanish. Carbon isotopes lose their rhythm. Signals that should trace the dance of ice ages simply stop, then resume again centuries later. Precision instruments, the pride of modern science, can measure the age of a single grain of dust, yet here they meet silence. One researcher compares the missing span to a skipped heartbeat in an electrocardiogram. The analogy spreads. Soon everyone speaks of the planet's pause. And indeed, when you look at the data plotted on vast chronological charts, the effect is unnerving. There, among millions of years, lies a blank band. It looks ordinary at first, a minor omission. But then you realize the scale, and it becomes monstrous. A canyon of lost time stretching across the landscape of Earth's history. The discovery reaches those who study volcanic rock as well. In the high plateaus of East Africa, lava flows have long served as timekeepers, locking within their minerals the magnetic orientation of the Earth at the moment they cooled. These records are dependable, immutable, until they too begin to stutter. Samples that should align with the known pattern of magnetic reversals refuse to cooperate. Between the Matuyama and Brunhes epochs, the direction of magnetism flickers, then disappears entirely. For 600,000 years, the needle of the planet's compass wavered and left no trace. It is as if the Earth blinked. From Greenland's frozen vaults to the volcanic bones of Africa, from ocean cores dredged near Antarctica to cave deposits in Europe, the same pattern repeats. Everywhere, a gap. Everywhere, the faint echo of something missing. Outside, the world remains indifferent. Snow continues to fall over the drill sites. Waves continue to break against basalt cliffs. But within the scientific community, quiet wonder mingles with unease. For decades, progress has meant narrowing the unknown. Yet here is an absence that refuses to close. They begin to question the instruments, the methods, even their assumptions about time itself. Could the planet's memory be nonlinear? Could immense pressures compress not only rock but chronology, folding centuries into moments? Some propose subtle tectonic processes, slow erosion, redeposition, glacial scouring. Others hint at stranger explanations. magnetic chaos, orbital irregularities, even cosmic interference. But every theory faces the same stubborn fact: the record is missing. In conference halls lit by sterile fluorescence, scientists display slides of graphs that dip into emptiness. They speak calmly, but the undertone is clear. What we know of Earth's history may be less complete than we believed. For all our precision, for all our satellites and sensors, we are still reading fragments of a book with pages torn out. There is a story often told among geologists, that of the first time someone held an ancient zircon crystal and realized it was older than the moon's visible seas. The feeling, they say, was one of reverent awe. Time made tangible. The discovery of the time hole is its inverse. Awe tinged with loss. Time made intangible. Back at the Greenland site, twilight never truly ends. The sun rolls along the horizon, casting a copper glow through the mist. A scientist steps outside the tent and listens. The drill is silent now. The day's work done. In that stillness, she feels the weight of what they've uncovered. Not a catastrophe, but an absence vast enough to humble any human certainty. The cold bites through her gloves, the frost crackles underfoot, and she realizes that even here, surrounded by tangible ice, she is standing on a metaphor, solidity that hides forgetting. When she returns inside, the others are huddled over a computer. They are recalculating depths, comparing notes, searching for error. But the screen shows the same stubborn pattern. Above, a layer dated to 900,000 years ago. Below, one from 300,000. Between them, nothing measurable. The room is warm from generators, yet the silence feels glacial. Finally, someone speaks. It's not just that something happened, he says softly. It's that something didn't. The phrase lingers. Because that is what chills the imagination most. Not the thought of catastrophe, but of stillness. 500,000 years during which the earth kept moving. Storms raged, seas shifted, creatures lived and died. And yet, for reasons unknown, none of it left a mark we can read. Later, the samples will travel across oceans, sealed in cold storage, their mysteries intact. They will be sliced, scanned, analyzed by instruments humming with microscopic precision. They will yield hints, perhaps fragments of explanation, but never the full story. And so the gap will endure, quiet and patient, like the ice from which it was drawn. In time, the scientists will move on to new projects, new expeditions. Some will grow old, still haunted by the data that refuse to speak. A few will dream of returning, of drilling deeper, hoping to touch the place where the missing years might still sleep. But the planet keeps its counsel. The frost closes over the boreholes, the wind smooths the snow, and the hum of the drill becomes memory. Far above, the auroras drift, green, silent curtains swaying over a world that conceals its past. The data screens fade to black, and in that darkness, the question glows faintly, waiting for whoever will listen next. If layers can vanish, if even time can lose its trail, then what does it mean to know anything at all? When scientists read the Earth, they do not open a book. They descend through time. Each layer of rock, each band of ice, each grain of sediment is a sentence in a language older than breath. For those who have learned to listen, the planet speaks in patterns, temperature etched into oxygen atoms, magnetic whispers frozen in iron dust, the faint chemical echoes of ancient life. The story, when whole, is astonishingly detailed. In the Greenland ice cores, a few centimeters might contain the memory of a single century. In the seafloor's slow drifts of mud, microfossils of plankton trace the rise and fall of oceans. Even the magnetic particles within lava flows remember the orientation of the planet's poles at the moment they cooled. From these clues, scientists reconstruct an unbroken symphony of climate and change, the heartbeat of the Earth across millions of years. They expect continuity. They expect rhythm, because for the most part, nature is dependable. Ice forms each winter, melts each spring. Sediment falls year after year in rivers and seas. Even cataclysms, the eruptions, the meteor strikes, leave signatures, scars that fit neatly within the wider flow of time. It is rare, almost unthinkable, for the music to stop. And yet, in the very span we call the time hole, the record ceases. The lines of data, temperature, magnetism, isotopes, flatten like a heart gone still. It is as though the instruments of the Earth itself were muted. To understand how strange that is, we must first understand how faithful the planet's clock usually is. Deep within its molten core, Iron flows like a slow river, generating the magnetic field that shields the surface from cosmic radiation. This field is not fixed. It drifts and shifts, but always within limits. Every few 100,000 years, however, something extraordinary happens. The poles reverse. North becomes south, compasses spin, the field collapses and rebuilds in the opposite direction. These reversals leave a clear pattern in rocks, a barcode of magnetism that geologists can read as easily as a date on a calendar. The most recent of these great flips occurred about 780,000 years ago. It is known as the Matuyama-Brunhes reversal, a name that sounds almost gentle, almost musical, but in its quiet way, it marked a moment when the Earth's inner compass wavered, flickered, and began to fail. Imagine lava erupting onto an ocean floor, cooling into black glass. Tiny crystals of magnetite within the rock align with the planet's magnetic field like thousands of microscopic needles. When the rock hardens, those needles freeze in place, capturing forever the direction of magnetic north. Later, when scientists retrieve the rock and measure its orientation, they can tell precisely what the planet's field looked like when that lava was young. Usually, the readings follow a steady rhythm of polarity flips across the ages, north to south, south to north, a metronome of geological time. But around the Matuyama-Brunhes boundary, the metronome falters. Rocks from different sites tell conflicting stories. Some record chaotic fluctuations, magnetic north wandering across the equator, looping back on itself, reversing and unreversing as if uncertain. Others show near silence, the field collapsing to almost nothing before returning in the opposite direction. For a moment, the Earth's shield all but vanished. The planet's compass spun wildly, and then, stillness. For the creatures living on the surface, the change would not have been immediately visible, but the sky itself may have glowed. Auroras might have burned across latitudes where they do not belong. Radiation from the sun may have brushed the upper atmosphere more fiercely. To life below, the effect was subtle yet profound, a trembling in the invisible fabric of protection. And within the geological record, something inexplicable followed. The pages went blank. When scientists compare the layers from that era, they find discontinuities not just in magnetism, but in everything else. Temperature proxies, dust deposits, biological signals. The record of glacial cycles loses definition. It is as if, during the chaos of magnetic upheaval, the planet forgot how to write its own story. At first glance, the missing layers seem merely technical, a problem of preservation, erosion, measurement. But as more evidence accumulates, the pattern holds steady. From about 900,000 to 300,000 years ago, the record grows thin and uneven across the world. Rivers erase their own deltas, ice melts and refreezes beyond recognition, sediments fail to settle. An entire 500,000 years becomes a blurred line between two clear epochs. The scientists do what they always do. They model, hypothesize, test. Could glaciers have scraped the surface clean? Could volcanic cycles have recycled the crust? Perhaps the reversal itself caused changes in climate, altering ocean currents, reshaping rainfall and sediment flow. But the answers, if they exist, remain partial. The data never quite coalesce into certainty. In the quiet of their laboratories, researchers stare at charts where time dissolves into static. They can see the world before the reversal, solid, rhythmic, predictable. They can see the world after, once again ordered. But in between lies a darkness of detail. No catastrophe, no mass extinction, no signal loud enough to explain the silence. Only the lingering sense that the Earth, in that span, hesitated. To explain such a pause is to confront the limits of knowledge itself. Science thrives on continuity, the assurance that with enough samples, enough precision, the past will reveal itself. But this gap resists precision. It mocks it. The equations balance beautifully up to a point, then scatter like sand. The certainty of Earth's clockwork collapses into the sudden blackout of memory. In the archives of the International Geophysical Year, there is a photograph often overlooked. A young scientist holding a basalt core, its edges still wet from the ocean floor. He smiles, unaware that within that dark cylinder lies one of the planet's great riddles. The basalt will later be analyzed, magnetically scanned, and catalogued under a number. Its readings will show inconsistency, a magnetic field caught mid-reversal, trembling between north and south, and around it, in the sediment that should have framed its story, there will be nothing. A void where fossils should lie, where dust layers should stack, a silence so complete that it can only be measured by what is not there. Sometimes, in lectures or papers, scientists soften the mystery with terminology. They speak of erosional gaps or depositional hiatuses, phrases that sound almost benign. But behind those words is wonder, because even when reduced to jargon, the missing time refuses to be ordinary. It is not a mere gap in stone. It is an erasure in the planet's consciousness, a moment when the mechanisms that record life's rhythm simply stopped. And yet, out of that stillness came renewal. After the Matuyama-Brunhes reversal stabilized, the field regained its strength. Sediment began to settle once more. Ice laid down its careful annual rings. The world resumed its quiet documentation of itself. To scientists, this restart is almost as mysterious as the pause. Why did the planet's systems begin recording again so neatly, as if nothing had happened? It is as though the Earth took a breath and then continued. For those who study deep time, the effect is humbling. Each discovery begins with confidence, the belief that the rocks will obey their own logic. But the deeper they look, the more the boundaries dissolve. Stone flows like water, ice becomes air, time becomes elastic. What was solid becomes suggestion, and the only constant is change. If you close your eyes and imagine the world during that unstable age, you might see landscapes half familiar, half alien, glaciers advancing and retreating in uncertain rhythm, continents tremoring under subtle magnetic currents, skies filled with pale auroras flickering in regions where no human would ever stand to witness them, the air tinged with iron, the seas restless, and beneath it all the slow, invisible turning of a planet unsure of its direction. The Earth, for all its grandeur, is not a machine but a living system, one that forgets and remembers in cycles longer than our species has existed. Its heartbeats are measured in reversals and hiatuses, in floods and droughts, in layers that appear and vanish. To study it is to listen to something vast and imperfectly recalled, and in that imperfection lies the beauty of its truth. As the data from the missing era continues to confound, a quiet question threads through the halls of science. If the Earth forgot, what else might have vanished with it? Perhaps entire climates, entire ecologies, entire chapters of evolution were written and then erased. Perhaps the ancestors of familiar species thrived and disappeared without trace, their bones recycled into new stone. Perhaps even the concept of time as we imagine it, linear, measurable, faithful, is itself an illusion, a human comfort imposed upon a restless world. The geologists close their notebooks. The labs fall silent except for the soft hum of refrigeration units guarding the cores of ice and rock. Outside, the evening deepens. In that darkness, the Earth continues to turn, carrying its secrets with the calm indifference of age. Somewhere beneath the crust, the iron rivers still flow, shaping the field that keeps us safe. Somewhere in the polar ice, another snowfall settles, pressing gently upon the past. The story continues, though we know it will never be complete. Because for all our measurements and our maps, there will always be lost epochs, chapters dissolved by the same forces that created them. The Earth, like memory itself, is both archive and amnesia. And perhaps that is the truest miracle of all, that from so many vanished records, we can still glimpse the pattern of life, still read the faint handwriting of time across stone and ice, still listen to the echo of an ancient silence that reminds us, even forgetting can be beautiful. If the Earth could dream, its dreams would be made of layers. Each snowfall, each tide, each drift of dust would settle and become memory. The planet, through pressure and patience, writes itself. Every grain of sand, every bubble of ancient air, every fossilized leaf is a syllable in that long conversation between matter and time. Scientists sometimes call this the Earth's memory. Not a metaphor, but a measurable truth. Ice holds the breath of ancient skies. Sediment traps the pollen of vanished forests. Fossils are the diary entries of things that once had hearts. In those patterns we read climate, extinction, rebirth. To hold a fragment of that record is to touch the consciousness of the world itself. But what happens when memory fails? What happens when the pages fade, when the record smears into silence? That is the riddle of the great forgetting. The moment when the planet lost 600,000 years of its own story. In a refrigerated lab, beneath the steady hum of machines, A researcher cradles half a cylinder of ice. It glows faintly under fluorescent light, a column of pale blue shot through with tiny spheres. Air bubbles trapped since the dawn of humankind. Normally, each bubble whispers data: carbon dioxide levels, traces of methane, microscopic particles that tell of wind and ash. But in this section, the signals are wrong. The ratios drift without pattern. The rhythm that should mark centuries is fractured. It is as if the ice has forgotten how to speak. She tilts the core toward the light. The bubbles shimmer like stars suspended in crystal. She imagines they are trying to tell her something, not words but feeling, pressure, cold, weight, time. Yet whatever story they once held has been pressed into silence. Around the world, other scientists find the same forgetfulness written into stone. Cores drawn from the ocean floor lack their usual precision. Sediments expected to show a slow dance of chemical change instead leap across ages as if skipping verses in a song. In cave deposits, the calcium layers that mark annual rains vanish for thousands of years, then reappear without explanation. Something, or many things, has interrupted the rhythm by which the Earth records itself. The evidence points to turmoil on a planetary scale. Glaciations advanced and retreated with abnormal speed. Ice sheets stretched across continents only to melt again within geological moments. Magnetic fields, already unstable from the Matuyama-Brunhes reversal, flickered weakly, letting more solar radiation touch the upper atmosphere. Climate swung from searing heat to crushing cold and back again. Every system that writes the planet's memory, water, wind, magnetism, life, trembled at once. And when all the scribes tremble, the archive blurs. Some researchers imagine vast glaciers grinding across northern lands, their weight pulverizing the record beneath. Others see oceans thick with sediment stirred and resettled, until all distinction between years is lost. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the planet's own restlessness became an eraser. To picture it, you must slow your thoughts until centuries feel like seconds. See the ice advancing, white cliffs miles high, moving southward in silence. Hear the groan of continents under their weight. Where the ice passes, valleys flatten, rivers reroute. The soil itself is taken away. Whole chapters of climate vanish beneath a clean slate of frost. Then, as warmth returns, torrents of meltwater carve new paths, washing the fragments elsewhere. Layer after layer dissolves, mingling ages that were never meant to meet. In that turbulent crossing of heat and cold, of sea and stone, memory fractures. And yet, there is no single catastrophe, no single roar to mark the loss. Only long, slow forgetting, the kind that happens quietly, grain by grain, until even the silence feels ancient. Scientists try to catalogue the mechanisms of erasure. They speak of glacial scouring, basal melting, isostatic rebound, phrases that sound clinical, almost serene. But behind them is awe, the realization that the planet itself can rewrite its own past. It does not preserve. It transforms. Stone becomes sediment. Sediment becomes stone again. Ice melts, refreezes, moves. Nothing holds still long enough to be eternal. Perhaps then, the great forgetting was not a failure, but an act of renewal. When magnetic fields collapsed and climates convulsed, the Earth may simply have turned a page. The evidence of one epoch was folded beneath the next, buried like roots beneath new growth. From the human perspective, it is loss. From the planet's, it may be rhythm. Still, there is unease in knowing that so much can vanish without trace. In the grand museums of geology, where specimens rest in glass cases, curators point to rocks older than continents. They represent stability, endurance, yet even they are survivors of constant transformation, fragments rescued from oblivion. For every stone we hold, countless others have been crushed, melted, or erased beyond recognition. The great forgetting is simply the moment when we became aware of how complete that erasure can be. In another lab, thousands of miles away, a geochemist studies sediment cores under microscope. Fine layers of silt, compacted through eons, unfold on her screen like the grooves of a record. She adjusts the magnification, expecting to see variation, thicker bands for warm periods, thinner for cold. Instead, the pattern stops. The colors blur. It looks as though someone has run a finger across fresh paint. She whispers to herself, time folded. Perhaps it did. Pressure and heat can deform strata until older layers curl upward, merging with younger ones. When that happens, chronology itself bends. Thousands of years collapse into a single inch of stone. In those folds, The boundary between before and after disappears. Time compressed becomes timeless. This is one of the quiet truths of geology. The Earth is always rewriting. Even as we study it, it is changing the script beneath our feet. Rivers we rely on to mark eras are already shifting course. Deserts are burying their own dunes. Volcanoes are erasing evidence of past eruptions. Memory is not a static archive, but a living organism, always growing, always forgetting. The phrase great forgetting might suggest tragedy. And to the scientist seeking data, it is. But to the dreamer, to the listener lying in the dark, it can sound like mercy. For without forgetting, there could be no renewal. Forests would never return after fire. Seas would never clear after storm. The act of erasure is also the act of making space for something new. Still, one cannot help but wonder what stories were lost in that 500,000 years. What species rose and vanished unrecorded? What climates flickered briefly, shaping landscapes that no longer exist? Perhaps entire dramas of evolution unfolded and were swept away, leaving not a fossil, not a shadow. When the Earth forgets, it forgets completely. The researcher in the cold lab sets the half-core of ice back into its case. Her reflection shivers on the glass, a modern witness to an ancient absence. She knows the data will never tell her everything. The numbers will align, the graphs will rise and fall, but the silence between them will remain. It is not a failure of science. It is the nature of memory itself. She turns off the lamp and the ice loses its glow. In darkness, it looks less like a specimen and more like a fragment of night. Opaque, secretive, whole. Outside, snow drifts against the lab windows. The world for a moment feels utterly still, and she wonders whether the Earth, too, feels the weight of its own remembering. And its forgetting. Maybe the missing years were not stolen or destroyed. Maybe they were absorbed, folded inward, hidden in the deep where pressure turns history into metamorphic stone. Some memories are not lost. They are simply transformed beyond recognition. The hum of the refrigeration unit continues, steady and low. In that sound, there is comfort, a mechanical echo of the planet's slow heartbeat. For all we cannot know, the world endures. It turns, forgets, remembers, turns again. When the researcher leaves the lab, she looks once more at the cases of ice cores gleaming faintly in their glass coffins. Each one holds a different era, a different tone of silence. Together, they are the Earth's memory. Imperfect, fragmented, beautiful. Perhaps that is all memory ever is. Not a perfect record, but a mosaic of what refuses to disappear. The rest dissolves into mystery, into pressure and transformation, into the slow breathing of stone. So when we speak of the great forgetting, let us not imagine a loss beyond repair. Let us think instead of the planet dreaming, turning old stories into new foundations. Because even in erasure there is creation, even in silence there is structure. Perhaps the Earth remembers, just not in ways we can read. Before there were names, before there were words, there were fires in the dark. They flickered against the walls of ancient valleys, small and trembling, their smoke vanishing into an air colder than memory. Around those flames, a few figures huddled. Not yet us, not yet human, as we know ourselves, but something close enough that we might recognize the curve of a hand, the tilt of a head, the need for warmth, and yet, of their existence, almost nothing remains. In the strata that should hold their bones, there is emptiness. In the soils that should bear the prints of their feet, there is silence. The Earth has erased even the shadows of their presence, as though the species that bridged animal and human walked through fog and left no mark behind. This, too, is part of the 600,000-year mystery. A gap not only in rock and ice, but in flesh and memory. Scientists have a name for the beings who might have lived then, Homo heidelbergensis. They were tall, strong, intelligent hunters, wielders of wooden spears, caretakers of fire, the ancestors of both Neanderthals and modern humans. They lived between roughly 700,000 and 200,000 years ago, the very span where time seems to blur. And yet, where we expect abundance, we find only fragments, a jawbone here, a skullcap there, tools, so few they seem like accidents. It is as if the early humans who stood at the threshold of our story lived through the great forgetting itself and were forgotten with it. Picture them in your mind. A river valley under a low red sun, the air tastes of iron and ash, the scent of fresh rain mixing with smoke. A small band gathers beside a stream where mammoths once drank. The leader, a woman perhaps, leans forward, coaxing sparks from a stone into dry moss. Around her, others wait in silence, their breath visible in the cold. When the flame catches, it throws gold light onto their faces. Strong brows, deep eyes, something unmistakably human in their weariness. For a brief moment, the valley glows with life, and then the wind changes, the river shifts. Centuries later, when that land hardens into sediment, no trace of them remains. This is how most of humanity's story began, in presence without permanence. We imagine prehistory as a gradual unfolding, ape to toolmaker, wanderer to builder, but the record is not a staircase. It is a series of islands separated by floods of forgetting. Between each known ancestor lies a chasm of uncertainty, where entire generations disappear without leaving a whisper. The 600,000-year gap is one of those chasms, a time when both the Earth and its inhabitants seem to have drifted into invisibility. Archaeologists call this a ghost horizon, a span in which artifacts and fossils thin to almost nothing. They dig where logic tells them life must have thrived, yet their spades strike only sterile soil. They scan the landscape with ground-penetrating radar and find voids where hearths should be. It's as if the world itself has conspired to keep those people hidden. And so, in the quiet hours of research, a question forms that science alone cannot answer. Did our ancestors live through the missing years? Or were they themselves part of what was lost? To imagine their lives is to step carefully between what is known and what is felt. We know they could hunt, shape tools, and bury their dead. We know they ranged across Africa, Europe, and Asia. But beyond that, we are left with scenes, guesses painted on air. A child tracing a spiral in wet clay, a hunter pressing his palm to a stone to feel its warmth, a mother singing softly to a newborn, her voice mingling with the crackle of the fire. No language we would recognize, only tone, rise and fall, comfort and rhythm. Perhaps somewhere in that melody was the first hint of humanity. And then, silence. The record stops. Tools disappear. Settlements, if they existed, are erased. The fossil trail goes cold. Even the DNA record becomes hazy, interrupted by mutations we cannot fully trace. For hundreds of millennia, there is almost nothing. It is a strange paradox that in the very era when human potential was awakening, the planet's memory was dimming. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the same upheavals that scraped away geological layers also scattered the fragile evidence of our kind. Floods, ice, wind, all conspiring to wash us clean from history's page. But there is another possibility, softer, more haunting. Perhaps those early humans truly lived in the shadows, small and rare, a whisper between worlds, too few, too scattered to leave a mark that could survive. A humanity that almost was, existing in the twilight before remembrance began. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear them. The rustle of grass against stone, the rhythm of bare feet on frost, the low hum of voices, speaking names that have never been heard by any living ear. Their world was not yet divided by nations or written stories. It was a raw, elemental landscape, fire and ice, hunger and hope. And in that vast emptiness, each spark of life was a miracle. When archaeologists uncover a single fragment, a tooth, a charred bone, a sliver of flint, they celebrate it as a message from that silence. Each one says, "We were here once," but for every fragment we find, there are millions more that never survived. The soil kept no record. The wind erased the rest. In one cave in Spain, scientists discovered a broken spear tip embedded in ancient sediment. It had been fashioned from yew wood, carved by hand and hardened in flame, a perfect weapon. When they dated it, the results startled them. Roughly 400,000 years old, too young for Homo erectus, too old for Neanderthals. It belonged to someone in between, someone who shouldn't exist in that layer of time. And yet, there it was. A memory that had somehow slipped through the great forgetting. Whoever held that spear once hunted on a cold, wet morning. Perhaps they followed herds across the misted plain, their breath steaming in the air. Perhaps they watched storm clouds gather and felt something stir inside. Awareness, curiosity, the faint shimmer of what we would one day call thought. And then, when their life ended, the earth folded their story away. Only the spear remained, like a word torn from a vanished language. In this way, The human past is both endless and invisible. Every generation builds upon ruins it cannot see. Even now, our oldest memories of myth, of dawn, of the first fires are built on absences. The missing years are not simply geological, they are personal. They are the years when we began to become aware, and the world looked back at us and forgot. Some anthropologists call that era the long prelude. It was a time when intelligence was forming but not yet recorded, and when the mind was awake but history had not yet begun. In that sense, the 600,000-year gap is not just about missing evidence, it's about the birth of awareness itself and how fragile it was at first. Imagine the feeling of waking in a world that does not yet remember you. You can make fire, you can shape tools, but the sky offers no sign that you exist. You can love, but there are no graves to mark your loss. You can speak, but the wind carries your voice into eras that will never hear it. Perhaps this is why, when we look into the void of the fossil record, we feel both awe and loneliness, because in that darkness lies the unrecorded dawn of who we are. If we could somehow recover those years, what would we find? Would we see the first sparks of language, the first shared stories whispered over embers? Would we find songs? Would we find the beginnings of tenderness, hands reaching across time to one another? Or would we find only silence, broken by the sound of wind against stone? Maybe both, because humanity's first gift was not invention, but endurance, the ability to persist even when unseen. Those forgotten ancestors may have lived and died without trace, but they carried something forward. A capacity to adapt, to imagine, to hope. It was that quiet persistence, not their bones or tools, that eventually shaped us. When modern humans finally emerged, Homo sapiens, storytellers, makers of symbols, they inherited a world that had already forgotten their precursors. But perhaps something of that earlier silence remained in us, the instinct to remember, to record, to fill the void with meaning. Maybe every myth, every painting, every story we tell is a rebellion against that first erasure. So when we stare into the dark interval of those missing years, we are not just searching for fossils, we are searching for ourselves. For the moment we first stepped into being and cast a shadow that the world could finally keep. And yet, even now, that shadow trembles, because memory, like the earth itself, is fragile. The same forces that erase their world will one day erase ours. All stories given time return to silence. Still, we keep telling them. We keep building fires in the dark, whispering into the vastness, hoping something will remain. Perhaps our ancestors lived through the missing years and left no memory of them, but through us their forgotten song continues, faint, steady, eternal. The earth is not still, it never was. Beneath the quiet forests and drifting seas, its core turns, molten iron flowing in slow, endless rivers. That movement, deep and unseen, creates the magnetic field that shields us from the fury of the sun. To most of history, that field has seemed eternal. Compasses point north, auroras shimmer in their cold polar dance. But there are moments when the planet forgets which way is north. Moments when the field falters, weakens, reverses. When the invisible shield around our world flickers like a candle in the wind. 600,000 years ago, in the depths of the Great Forgetting, that flicker became chaos. Imagine a sky where auroras stretch not just across the poles, but the equator, green and violet veils rippling over jungles, over deserts, over oceans that glowed faintly at night as charged particles struck their surfaces. Imagine the compass, if any had existed, spinning wildly, never settling. Imagine a world where the sun burned brighter than it should, its radiation unfiltered, falling upon a planet in flux. That was the Earth then, magnetic north wandering, climate convulsing, memory blurring. Geophysicists studying the rocks of that age find signatures of instability. Iron minerals, normally aligned in neat patterns, point in every direction, as if the planet's magnetic heart had lost its rhythm. The field, once strong and ordered, had weakened to a mere fraction of its strength. Without it, more cosmic radiation reached the surface, altering weather, disrupting the thin balance of life. It was not a single catastrophe, no explosion, no apocalypse, but a long trembling, the kind that reshapes the world grain by grain. In the Antarctic, ice grew thicker, stretching toward the sea. In Africa, plains withered into dust. In Europe, forests retreated beneath advancing frost. Then, almost as suddenly, warmth returned. Glaciers melted, rivers roared with meltwater, carving new paths through stone. The planet could not decide. Freeze or thaw, silence or flood. Scientists have traced these oscillations in the data, the fingerprints of a world shivering between extremes. Each fluctuation 1,000 years long, each a breath between ice and fire. They name the pattern the mid-Pleistocene transition, a time when Earth's glacial rhythm changed from gentle pulses every 40,000 years to violent cycles of 100,000. No one knows exactly why. Some suspect orbital shifts, the slow wobble of the planet's axis altering the sunlight that falls upon it. Others blame supervolcanoes or undersea methane bursts that tipped the climate from calm to chaos. Some even wonder whether cosmic forces, nearby supernovae or shifts in solar activity, may have disturbed the planet's fragile equilibrium. But in truth, no theory captures the strangeness of it fully, because what the record shows is not destruction, but confusion, a planet rewriting itself in real time, as though trying to find a new balance. The world then must have looked both alien and familiar. Ice sheets the height of mountains crowned the north, reflecting sunlight into space. Tropical belts shrank and expanded in rhythm with the shifting tilt of the planet. Deserts bloomed and died again. In the oceans, plankton populations rose and collapsed in chaotic waves, changing the color of the sea itself. Even the air would have felt different, sharp and dry, then thick and heavy, as global temperatures swung by degrees that today would doom civilizations. And yet, through it all, life endured. Mammoths trudged across the frozen plains of Eurasia. Early humans huddled in caves or gathered on the shores of shrinking lakes. Tiny algae drifted through the seas, capturing sunlight, breathing oxygen into the sky. Every living thing, from the smallest spore to the largest predator, learned to bend with the storm. That is the hidden beauty in these moments of upheaval, not destruction, but adaptation. When the magnetic field weakened, the Earth's shield grew thin, and yet, some species evolved thicker pigmentation, more efficient DNA repair, or behaviors that sheltered them from the sun's fury. When ice advanced, others learned migration, patience, hibernation. When warmth returned, they filled the empty spaces again. Survival was not resistance, it was flexibility. Life learning to breathe with the planet's rhythm, even when that rhythm faltered. The fossil record, faint as it is, suggests a kind of resilience that borders on the miraculous. Even in times of chaos, evolution quickened. Old species vanished, but new ones appeared in their place. Stronger, more adaptable, more aware. What we call collapse may have been, to life itself, a new beginning. Still, from a human perspective, it is hard not to feel the weight of that instability. If you stood on the Earth during one of those magnetic lulls, the sky would have looked strange. A green fire flickering even at midday, the horizon tinted with colors no human eye has seen since. At night, auroras would dance across the entire heavens, not just the poles. The stars themselves would seem to waver, and beneath that haunting beauty, radiation levels would rise, invisible and unrelenting. The air, too, would shift. Ozone, disturbed by the weakened magnetic field, would thin, allowing more ultraviolet light to pierce the atmosphere. Clouds would form differently. Storms would take new paths. It would have felt like the world was alive, restless, unpredictable, conscious of its own changes. Perhaps that is why this period feels more like a dream than a record. A phase when the Earth forgot its own boundaries, when all the elements blurred together. Magnetism, climate, biology, each affecting the other in a looping dance of cause and consequence. And somewhere within that dance, our ancestors watched and endured. It's tempting to imagine that these shifts were punishment or purpose, that there was meaning behind the chaos. But nature is not moral. It is cyclical. The same forces that threaten also sustain. When the magnetic field recovered, it returned stronger. When glaciers retreated, they left behind fertile valleys and lakes filled with life. The trauma of change became the foundation for renewal. That is how the planet survives its own forgetting. We often think of the Earth as fragile, yet its resilience is profound. It can lose half its memory and still continue its song. It can collapse, rebuild, and evolve, all within spans of time too vast for us to imagine. But as we look back on that ancient chaos, there is a quiet reflection hidden within the data, one that feels less like science and more like prophecy. Because our modern world, too, is shifting. Magnetic north is moving again, faster now than at any time in recorded history. Drifting across the Arctic towards Siberia, the magnetic field has been weakening for centuries, and satellites record strange anomalies. Patches of reduced strength spreading like bruises over the South Atlantic. The climate too oscillates, ice melts, seas rise, storms grow in number and power. We stand once more in a moment of flux. It would be easy to see this as a return of the old chaos, a repetition of the ancient pattern, but there is another way to see it. As a reminder, the Earth has forgotten before. It has stumbled, rewritten itself, lost entire epochs to the tides of change. And still, life endures. In the same way that ancient creatures adapted, we are now being asked to remember how to bend, not break, to find balance within the trembling, to listen to the rhythm of the world and move with it, rather than against it. Imagine again those equatorial auroras, light shimmering where no light should be. They are not omens of doom, but signs of transformation, a world remaking itself as it has done countless times before. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson of the great forgetting, that even when the planet loses its memory, when all patterns dissolve, the essence of life, the drive to continue, persists untouched. The universe is not built upon permanence, but upon motion. The field will reverse again someday. The ice will come and go and come again, and somewhere, under the shimmer of the aurora, something living will adapt, will survive, will remember. So when we ask, could it happen again? The answer is simple. It already is, but this time, we are here to witness it, to tell its story, to leave a trace that the next remembering might find. The planet turns beneath our feet, the core humming softly in its iron rhythm. Above, the sky glows faintly with unseen light. Between them, life holds its fragile line, unbroken, resilient, luminous. The Earth has forgotten before, and even through forgetting, it endures. The sea is calm tonight. A low hum rises from the research vessel as it drifts in open water, hundreds of miles from any shore. The deck lights cast a pale halo that trembles on the waves. Somewhere below, nearly 3 miles down, a metal drill bites into the seabed, grain by grain, layer by layer, reaching for the memory of the Earth. It is midnight on the ship, but work never truly stops. In a small lab lit only by computer screens, a scientist leans over a monitor, tracing faint colored bands on a digital scan. Each stripe represents centuries of time, compressed into mud. The machine whirs softly. Beyond the glass, darkness stretches to the edge of everything. Somewhere in that darkness lies a silence, 600,000 years long. The missing story they are trying to read. The samples arrive in long cylinders of sediment, lifted from the deep like scrolls from a sunken library. They look unremarkable. Grey-brown sludge, cold to the touch, faintly metallic in scent. But within them are secrets written in isotopes, fossils too small to see, and magnetic grains that still remember where North once was. This is how scientists speak with time, not through words, but through atoms. Each isotope, each trace of oxygen or carbon, tells a part of the planet's biography. Oxygen 18 for temperature, carbon 14 for decay, argon, uranium, lead, clocks hidden in minerals, ticking at the speed of eternity. When those clocks are compared across continents, they form patterns, echoes of climate and chaos, whispers of long-lost ages. But in the middle of those patterns, there is always a blank, a silence in the data, a window of time where numbers refuse to align, where even the atoms seem to hesitate. That blank is the great forgetting. And even now, in the most advanced labs, it resists reconstruction. In a building half a world away, another scientist works in near darkness. It's past midnight in her lab. A single lamp glows beside a microscope. She holds a fragment of rock no bigger than her palm. A slice from an Antarctic ridge, polished smooth until it gleams like obsidian. Through the lens, she sees tiny magnetic crystals frozen in the rock's matrix, each one a microscopic compass needle. Their directions are wrong, north-south, then north again, all within the same layer. It is geological madness, frozen in place. She exhales softly. What she's looking at isn't chaos, it's memory loss. a planet trying to remember which way it turned. This is how the story of deep time is told, in fragments, in contradictions, in glimpses. For every answer, there are 10 new uncertainties. The deeper we dig, the more we find that the Earth's memory is not written like a book, but like a palimpsest, an ancient text rewritten over itself again and again, words fading beneath words. Still, we read, on board the ship, dawn begins to pale the horizon. The crew gathers for coffee, exhausted but content. They have retrieved another core, another chance at decoding silence. They joke softly, their laughter drifting over the water. But beneath the weariness, there is reverence. They are not just scientists. They are translators of the untranslatable. Every meter of core, every grain of sediment, is a clue. And yet, as one of them once said, every clue reveals less than it hides. The data points are like stars scattered across a night sky, bright, beautiful, incomplete. Between them stretches darkness that numbers cannot fill. But in that darkness lies wonder, the invitation to imagine. There is something deeply human in that act, to face a universe that erases and still insist on remembering. Consider radiometric dating, a method so precise it can measure the decay of atoms that have ticked undisturbed for millions of years. To the untrained eye, it looks like chemistry. To those who understand it, it's something closer to prayer, an act of faith in constancy, in the idea that the universe, even in its forgetting, still follows a rhythm we can trust. When scientists date a sample, they are asking time to speak. But time answers in riddles. One mineral says one thing, another disagrees. The gaps remain, and so they compare. They cross-check, they adjust, they persist. It's a kind of archaeology of the invisible, rebuilding an age that refuses to stand still. In another lab, deep within a mountain observatory, a different kind of clock is studied. Here, cosmic rays leave faint imprints on detectors, tiny bursts of energy from distant stars. Some of those bursts match anomalies in the magnetic record. Some do not. A pattern begins to emerge, and then it dissolves. It's as if the heavens themselves are echoing the Earth's confusion. The sky, too, bears scars of lost time, radiation trapped in meteorites, isotopic oddities in the solar wind, even cosmic dust in the ice of Antarctica that dates to those same mysterious centuries. Stone and sky whisper the same story. Something happened and yet nothing happened. A disruption without a cause. The search becomes almost spiritual. Each core sample, each data graph, is a fragment of a lost gospel, a record of a world both ancient and unfinished. And those who study it do so with the patience of monks, repeating measurements, recalibrating instruments, aware that perfection is impossible. They are chasing a ghost that may never be caught. Sometimes, after long nights, a researcher will step outside, needing air. The campus is quiet, the sky above hums with faint starlight. Looking up, they feel the same humbling thought. We are reconstructing something that doesn't want to be known. And yet they keep going, because the silence of the great forgetting is not just absence, it is invitation. Each missing line in the data calls for imagination, for empathy across millennia. It asks us to remember that the world existed before us and will continue long after, with or without a witness. The instruments we build, spectrometers, magnetometers, satellites, are our way of holding hands with time. They extend our senses into the depths of what has been erased, trying to find shape in the void. It is delicate work, both scientific and poetic. We are measuring what cannot be measured, listening for echoes that may no longer exist. In one experiment, a team studies tiny shells from the ocean floor, foraminifera, creatures smaller than a grain of sand. Their calcium shells record the chemistry of the seawater they lived in. By reading the isotopic ratios inside, scientists can reconstruct ancient temperatures, even winds. But during the missing interval, those shells tell conflicting stories. Some say warm, others cold. Some layers vanish entirely. It is like listening to a symphony with half the notes missing. And still, the melody is there. From these fragments, dust, rock, ice, researchers build a fragile timeline, a portrait painted in absences. They know it is incomplete, but they also know it is beautiful, because in every gap lies the proof that we are trying, that consciousness itself is an act of defiance against entropy. In this sense, the scientists on the ship, in the lab, under the stars, They are not just studying the past. They are participating in the oldest human ritual, the refusal to let mystery remain untouched. Think of the persistence it takes to drill into the seafloor for months, pulling up mud 1 centimeter at a time, to spend years cross-checking isotopic ratios that differ by a fraction of a percent, to stare at error bars and noise and still say, "We are getting closer," and maybe that persistence, that stubborn, gentle faith, is what separates us from the indifference of the cosmos. Because the universe does not care whether its secrets are known. The stars burn, the rocks turn, the atoms decay, indifferent to our curiosity. And yet, here we are, trying to reconstruct the irrecoverable, to coax meaning out of silence. There is a strange grace in that. Back on the ship, as dawn lifts over the horizon, the drilling stops. The last core segment is pulled aboard, a dark cylinder of clay and shell and history. The crew gathers, eyes squinting against the light. Someone runs a hand along the cold metal, leaving a streak of salt and dust. For a moment, nobody speaks. They all know they've retrieved something the world itself forgot to remember. The core will be sealed, labeled, and shipped to a lab. There, under glass, it will be sliced thin, scanned, catalogued. Its story will join thousands of others in databases that span continents. And still, the silence will remain. The long, unbroken pause in the record. Every clue reveals less than it hides. But maybe that's what makes the search sacred. The missing years remind us that even the most precise knowledge has edges, and beyond those edges lies wonder. We do not uncover the past to conquer it, but to listen, to place our hands on the surface of the world and feel it breathe. Somewhere beneath the waves and the mountains, the answers rest, not lost, only quiet, waiting perhaps for the right kind of question. And so, the scientists return to their work. The drills descend again, the microscopes hum softly. Time continues its slow conversation with those who dare to ask. Stone and sky keep their secrets. But we keep listening, because in every silence, there is the faint echo of something that once was. And maybe, if we are patient enough, will be remembered again. There are moments in the history of the world when everything seems to stop, not in destruction, but in pause. Moments when the record fades, the signals falter, and the planet seems to blink. 600,000 years of missing memory, not gone, just hidden, lies at the heart of this story. And like all mysteries, it invites theories, whispers of explanation, each as fragile and uncertain as the layers they try to interpret. Scientists do not speak of this gap with frustration, but with awe. They know that nature seldom leaves a clean trail. What looks like silence may simply be the soft exhalation between one heartbeat of the Earth and the next. Still, they wonder, why did the planet forget? Why, in an age when glaciers advanced and life evolved, did the record go dim? Some say it was the magnetic field, that invisible guardian that wraps the Earth like a cocoon. We know it wavered then, weakened, reversed. When the magnetic poles flip, the compass of the world spins without anchor. For thousands of years, radiation increases. Cosmic dust rains harder. Particles reshape the chemistry of air and ocean. If that happened during the missing centuries, it could have blurred the planet's own archive, scrambling isotopes, confusing the clocks we now rely on. The evidence points to chaos. Magnetic crystals locked in contradictory directions, iron-bearing rocks recording north and south at once. The Earth's internal dynamo faltered, and with it, perhaps, its ability to remember. But that is only one theory, one fragment of a greater mosaic. Others speak of climate collapse, an age of extremes that swung too far, too fast. Imagine ice sweeping across continents, erasing soil, grinding mountains into dust. Imagine rivers rising and flooding, carving canyons where forests once stood. Each surge of meltwater carried sediment from one epoch and scattered it into another, blurring boundaries that once marked time. The clues of that violence remain faintly visible. Erratic boulders resting where no glacier should have reached, layers of silt turned upside down, fossils displaced hundreds of miles from their origin. If these storms of ice and heat overlapped with magnetic confusion, it would have been a double erasure. Geology and physics, conspiring to fold history in upon itself. Then there are those who turn their gaze deeper, beneath the crust, to the restless mantle below. They suggest that the Earth may have recycled its own memory. It is a humbling idea. The crust, the thin skin on which we live, is not permanent. It is constantly created and consumed, drawn into the mantle through tectonic subduction, where pressure and heat transform it back into molten stone. In that slow churning, the record of an entire age could vanish. If a section of the seabed formed during the missing years was drawn down into the mantle, its sediments and fossils would be lost, returned to the elemental soup from which new crust later rises. It would be the ultimate act of planetary renewal, the Earth cleansing its own past to make space for the future. And perhaps, in that image, there is a strange comfort. The idea that forgetting is not destruction, but renewal. Each theory holds a grain of truth, and each an ocean of doubt. Some researchers look even farther outward, to the cosmos itself. They point to possible cosmic events, the passing of a dense interstellar cloud, a nearby supernova, a surge in solar activity that bathes the Earth in radiation. Such bursts could alter atmospheric chemistry, trigger rapid cooling or warming, even interfere with magnetic generation in the core. But these are hypotheses woven from faint starlight and probability. The evidence is elusive, more poetry than proof. Still, the mind drifts toward the image, the universe itself blinking, and the Earth blinking back. Imagine it, a distant star dying in a soft explosion of light, its radiation sweeping across the solar system. For a brief cosmic instant, the Earth's shield trembles. The sky brightens, then dims, and in that blink, the magnetic poles waver, the glaciers grow, and history's handwriting smears. Not an apocalypse, just a sigh, a celestial moment that rewrote the rhythms of the world below. Then there are the smaller, quieter explanations. Perhaps it was erosion, rain and wind working with patient cruelty. Perhaps it was biological turnover, species dying out in numbers too small to fossilize. Perhaps it was chance, the randomness of preservation. Where the dice of geology rolled and came up empty, every explanation feels both possible and incomplete. The deeper truth may be that there is no single cause, that the gap in Earth's record is not a scar, but an overlap, a chorus of processes singing out of sync, their harmonies colliding, leaving behind not silence, but dissonance. When the data are laid out, the magnetic reversals, the isotope swings, the missing fossils, what emerges is not a clean story, but a shimmering blur. And perhaps that is what the Earth's blink truly was. Not absence, but overexposure. Too much change, too quickly for any one system to capture. A planet overwhelmed by its own becoming. The metaphors scientists use betray a kind of affection. They speak of the dimming, the lost signal, the pause in the pulse. It is language more suited to lullabies than to research papers. And yet, in that language, there is tenderness, the recognition that even the Earth, vast as it is, has moments of vulnerability. We like to think of time as continuous, but nature works in fragments. The oceans rise, erase, withdraw. The mountains lift, crumble, and form again. Even the stars live and die in pulses of light. Perhaps forgetting is not failure, but rhythm, the heartbeat of creation itself. If so, the great forgetting may not be an anomaly. It may be a reminder that memory, on a cosmic scale, is always incomplete. Think of light traveling through space, how it dims, how it scatters, how distance turns it into whispers. Our planet, too, carries that same impermanence. Its rocks are archives of light turned solid, yet even stone cannot hold its story forever. Time wears it down, grain by grain, like a slow shutter closing. When we call it the Earth's blink, we do not mean it literally. We mean that for a fraction of deep time, the planet's gaze faltered, and when it opened again, the scenery had changed. What happened during that blink? No one can say for certain, but the effects ripple forward through every record that follows. In isotope shifts, in reverse magnetism, in missing fossils. Like the afterimage of a flash, its presence lingers long after the light is gone. Even now, the data we collect carries the echo of that forgotten rhythm. When scientists drill into ancient rock, when they measure trapped gases, when they trace the wandering poles, they are not just studying what was. They are studying what the Earth chose not to preserve. And maybe that is the quiet heart of this mystery. That forgetting, in nature, is not neglect. It is adaptation. To remember everything would be to drown in one's own history. Mountains would bear infinite weight, oceans, infinite memory. To continue, something must always be let go. The planet forgets so that it can live. And perhaps, in our own small way, we do the same. Our species remembers selectively. We preserve the moments that define us and let the rest fade into the soft blur of time. It is not weakness, but survival. The same law that governs stone and sky. Every theory, every hypothesis is a reflection of this deeper truth, that to understand the Earth is to accept that certainty is impossible. The closer we look, the more the edges dissolve. The more we explain, the more mystery grows. The great forgetting, then, is not a problem to solve, but a mirror. It shows us who we are, creatures of memory and amnesia, trying to read eternity with hands made of dust. The scientists continue their work. Cores are drilled, rocks sliced thin, magnetic signatures plotted. Each discovery brings clarity and also deeper wonder. They are learning to love the unanswerable. Because sometimes the blink itself is the story. Perhaps the Earth did not lose 600,000 years. Perhaps it simply closed its eyes, breathed and began again. And perhaps that is what all worlds do in their own time. Stars flicker, galaxies dim and relight. Even the universe, some physicists say, may one day contract and expand again, an infinite blinking of creation. So when we speak of the great forgetting, let us do so gently. Let us not mourn what was lost, but marvel at what remains. The rocks still whisper, the ice still glows, the magnetic field still hums, invisible and steady, wrapping us in the memory of all that came before. And in the quiet between its pulses, we can almost hear the world breathe, a slow exhalation that says, yes, I blinked, but I am still here. Perhaps it's not just the Earth that forgets. Perhaps forgetting is part of survival. We live in an age that fears forgetting. Every second, data hums through invisible veins. Satellites, servers, clouds that never sleep. Our phones hold more photographs than our ancestors could have imagined. Our histories are etched not into stone, but into flickering code. We promise ourselves that nothing will be lost again. And yet, when scientists look into that 600,000-year silence, the great forgetting, they see a reflection of us. The Earth once had a memory so vast, it could remember every tide, every wind, every heartbeat of its crust. Then, for reasons still unknown, it went quiet. Layers vanished, signals blurred, stories broke off mid-sentence. What it left behind was not a scar, but a mirror. A reminder that even the greatest archivist in the cosmos forgets. We build data centers cooled by artificial blizzards, walls humming with the breath of electricity. But one solar flare, one shift of magnetic field, one flood, and the memories inside could vanish, gone, like the whispers in the rock. Our own age, in all its brilliance, stands on the same fragile edge between remembrance and erasure. We record everything, but what will remain when the next silence comes? The scientists who study the lost epochs often speak not just as researchers, but as philosophers. They kneel beside the Earth's broken pages and understand the past is never complete. Every discovery opens a new blind spot. Every measurement carries uncertainty like dust on its surface, and somehow that imperfection makes the story more beautiful. When the Earth blinked, it did not end. It continued, patient and alive, reshaping itself from what remained. Its loss became its renewal. Perhaps our civilization, too, will learn from that rhythm. Imagine, centuries from now, future explorers finding fragments of us, a shard of glass, a digital fossil imprinted in hardened sediment. They might wonder who we were. They might ask why our record stops at a certain point, why our voices faded. They might name it the second forgetting and build their own myths around the silence we left. The thought is not frightening. It is freeing, because the lesson of the Earth's missing time is not despair, but humility. It reminds us that permanence is an illusion, and that even the vastness of the planet breathes in cycles of remembering and release. Our attempts to preserve everything, every photo, every file, every word, are acts of love, but also acts of denial. We are trying to outpace the natural rhythm of fading. The Earth has already shown us that memory is not linear. It is tidal. It flows, then recedes, and what returns is transformed. Think of the glaciers that once carved mountains, now melting into rivers. Think of forests regrown from the ashes of volcanic plains. Think of stars collapsing into darkness, only to scatter new light into the birth of galaxies. Forgetting, in its deepest sense, is how the universe breathes. In our world of constant noise, the great forgetting feels like an alien concept, a silence so complete it erases meaning. But perhaps the silence is what gives meaning shape. Without it, there is no contrast, no pause, no place for reflection. The missing years are not just absence. They are the stillness that allows the next chapter to begin. Listen closely to the world around you, the hum of machines, the low rhythm of traffic, the endless streams of messages and notifications. All of it, one day, will fade into the same quiet hum the earth once knew, and maybe that is not tragedy but continuity. The same pattern, repeating through time, from stone to cloud, from sediment to silicon. Somewhere deep in Greenland, a researcher holds an ice core, examining trapped air from tens of millennia ago. Those bubbles are tiny worlds, frozen whispers of what once was. She studies them under sterile light, and though her instruments hum with precision, there is always a point where the readings blur, where the signal collapses into static, and she smiles softly because she knows that static is truth too. It is the echo of mystery, reminding her that not everything can or should be known. In a way, our own archives mirror those cores. We preserve our breath in videos, in posts, and voices stored on servers. We trap our air in glass, believing it will last forever. But entropy waits patiently. Magnetic fields will shift again. Technology will crumble. The light will change. And in that far future, when our records are unreadable, the earth will still remember us in its own way. In the layers of soot, the scatter of elements, the quiet rearrangement of stone. Not as we intended, but as we became. Perhaps that is what the hole in time teaches most gently, that meaning survives even when memory fades. The pattern endures even when the details dissolve. The beauty is not in what is preserved, but in what continues despite loss. When scientists speak of that gap, they often fall silent midway, as if words themselves cannot bridge it. They look at each other across data tables, and there is a pause, a reverence, a recognition that this mystery, this absence, is as alive as any discovery. And isn't that what we seek too? In our sleepless nights, in our quiet hours, in our endless archives, to find meaning inside the spaces we cannot fill. The gap in Earth's record is more than geology. It is philosophy pressed into stone. It asks us to see forgetting not as failure, but as balance, a reminder that we do not own time. We are only passing through it. There is a tenderness in that understanding. The same tenderness found in ruins, in faded photographs, in the blurred edge of memory where love still lingers, though faces have gone. The Earth's lost centuries are like that. Not gone, just softened, waiting beyond reach. We are children of a planet that forgets, and so, forgetting lives in us too. We forget names, places, feelings, yet somehow what matters endures beneath the surface, waiting to be remembered in another form. The great forgetting humbles us, but it also connects us to something timeless. It tells us that knowledge is a rhythm, not a possession. That to lose is not to fail, but to make space for what's next. When you close your eyes tonight, think of the earth beneath you, layers upon layers, histories folded underfoot. Think of how, right now, rivers are writing new stories, winds are erasing old ones, and somewhere beneath the oceans, sediment is quietly sealing our present into the deep. We are already becoming the next fossil, the next mystery, the next silence someone will try to understand. And maybe that is enough, to know that we are part of a conversation larger than ourselves, that even if our words fade, the echo remains. The hole in time, the lost centuries, the vanished epochs. They are not just scientific puzzles. They are meditations on being. They remind us that existence is both fleeting and infinite, that forgetting and creation are two sides of the same pulse. So when you next look up at the night sky, remember, those stars are memories too. Light traveling across millennia, carrying the story of suns that no longer exist. You are already surrounded by ghosts of light, proof that forgetting and remembering coexist everywhere. We record everything, yet one day the servers will cool, the satellites will fall, and the dust will reclaim the metal. And what will remain is not the data, but the pattern. The same pulse that once moved through glaciers and stars alike. The great forgetting whispers a truth both humbling and gentle, that permanence was never the point. That meaning lies in the act of remembering, not in the guarantee that memory will last. Perhaps this is why the missing time feels almost sacred, because it leaves room for imagination, for faith, for wonder. It invites us to accept mystery without fear. It teaches that knowledge is not a wall, but a window, and beyond it, the vast quiet of what we do not yet know. Somewhere, the earth still breathes beneath the ice and stone, holding the secret of those vanished years. It is not hiding it from us, only keeping it safe in its own way, until we learn how to listen differently. And as we listen, we begin to hear echoes not just of the planet, but of ourselves. The same rhythms, the same pauses, the same need to remember and to let go. The night stretches on, calm and endless. Above, the stars shimmer, ancient, patient, already fading into light we cannot yet see. Below, the earth dreams in silence. Its memory flickers, our servers hum, both for a moment, alive in the same rhythm of forgetting and renewal. And in that gentle synchrony, we understand. The missing years were never missing at all. They were simply the earth taking a breath, the same breath we take now, under the same stars. The night returns. It always does. Above us, the sky is the same as it was when glaciers ruled and oceans slept beneath the stars. Each pinprick of light is a story still unfolding, ancient radiance crossing oceans of time to reach our eyes. And somewhere beneath those stars, the earth breathes, slow, steady, patient. We began this journey in silence, a silence older than memory itself, 600,000 years of absence, where time seems to have paused, folded, and then resumed its rhythm as if nothing had happened. We have followed that silence through ice and fire, through magnetic storms and vanished seas, through the faint traces of forgotten lives. And now, at the end, we find ourselves standing again beneath the same quiet heavens, changed, not by answers but by understanding. The great forgetting, as scientists call it, is not only a mystery of stone and isotopes, it is a mirror, held up to the fragility of all things that remember. For every archive, every fossil, every written word is a defiance of time, a brief gesture against the vast forgetting that waits beyond. But in that defiance, there is tenderness. Because to record is to love, to preserve is to care. And the earth too has loved. It has tried to remember itself, layering stories in sediment and snow, pressing breath into ice, until one day it stopped, not in anger, not in violence, but in stillness, a breath drawn in, held for 600,000 years, and then, slowly, released. We look into that pause and see a question. How can time disappear? But perhaps the question is softer than it sounds. Perhaps time never vanished. Perhaps it only changed its form, becoming silence so that the world could rest. Listen, and you can almost hear it. The hush of snow falling on the Greenland ice, the sigh of wind brushing through dry volcanic sand, the pulse of molten rock deep below, slow and constant as the beat of a sleeping heart. In that rhythm, there is no fear, only continuation. The stars above, the stones below, the water between them, all are moving at their own unhurried pace, erasing and rebuilding with equal grace. The missing years were part of that balance, a silence between chapters, a comma in the long sentence of creation. It's easy to think of forgetting as failure, as loss, but the earth reminds us that forgetting can also be mercy. Without pause, there would be no renewal. Without silence, no song. The gap between epochs is not an absence, but an invitation to wonder, to imagine, to listen. When you close your eyes, picture it. A night 600,000 years ago. The air colder, the constellations slightly shifted, the land unrecognizable yet familiar in its solitude. Somewhere, wind moves across ice. Somewhere else, the first faint sparks of human ancestors glimmer beside the darkness. Their fires flicker like the stars, fragile, fleeting, but real. And though their voices have been erased, the warmth of their existence remains, folded into the breath of the world. Perhaps they too looked at the night sky and wondered how it all began. Perhaps they felt the same quiet awe, the same longing to belong to something larger than themselves. In their silence, we can hear our own. The great forgetting connects us across ages, not through knowledge, but through unknowing. It teaches us that mystery is not emptiness. It is space, Space for reflection, for humility, for the endless curiosity that keeps us awake beneath the stars. When scientists drill through ice, what they uncover is not just data, but patience. Patience layered over millennia, crystallized in the slow work of snow. When they study ancient rocks, they are reading the handwriting of wind and water. And when they find nothing, no fossils, no record, that too is a kind of answer, because even silence has texture. The missing centuries remind us that existence is not defined by what endures, but by what flows. A mountain rises, then erodes. A species thrives, then fades. A civilization builds monuments, then leaves them to the moss. Everything passes, yet everything continues, transformed. And in that realization lies peace. The world does not mourn what it forgets. It lets go. And in letting go, it lives again. Our own stories will one day dissolve the same way. The recordings, the words, the photographs, they will fade like frost at dawn. But the impulse that created them, the need to remember, to connect, to make meaning from the silence, that will remain. It will ripple through whatever comes next, just as the Earth's lost breath still echoes in its winds and tides. Somewhere in the deep ocean, new sediments are falling, layering slowly upon the old. Somewhere beneath a glacier, air is being trapped again, carrying the whispers of our age. The record continues, even if we cannot read it. And so we return, full circle, to the quiet of the present, the hum of the earth beneath our feet, the slow drift of stars above. The same forces that once erased are still at work, shaping tomorrow's memory even as they soften today's. We stand as all life has stood, between remembering and release. Perhaps that is what makes the missing years sacred. They are proof that even in the heart of silence, life goes on. That creation does not stop when the story fades. It only changes its voice. The earth, it seems, dreams as we do. It forgets, it awakens, it dreams again. And maybe that is the truest continuity of all. Not an unbroken line, but a series of awakenings separated by silence. The stars above shimmer faintly against the black. They are ancient, but they are also fleeting. Their light will fade long before their memory does. Yet even when the last star dims, there will still be motion. The quiet hum of particles, the invisible dance of energy in the dark. Time, in its own way, will continue dreaming. When you breathe, remember, your lungs are filled with atoms older than the sun, recycled through oceans, forests, and stone. The breath you take now once belonged to something else, long forgotten. The universe remembers you, even if you forget yourself. The earth has taught us this. To live is to be remembered imperfectly. To endure is to change, and to understand is to listen, not just to the noise of history, but to the pauses between it. As the night deepens, the world around you settles into that rhythm again. Winds move through valleys, brushing the dust of forgotten mountains. The air cools, the horizon softens. Somewhere, a glacier creaks in the dark, and a river forms from its melting. A new story beginning where another one ends. And through it all, the silence remains, vast, tender, alive. We have searched for meaning in layers of rock, in fields of magnetism, in the shimmer of auroras across an ancient sky. But perhaps the meaning was never hidden there. Perhaps it was always here, in the listening. Because when we listen closely, we realize the earth never stopped speaking. We simply had to learn the language of its pauses. Every silence, every missing record, every unspoken moment, they are not voids. They are the places where time exhales, the gentle intervals that give shape to eternity. And so beneath the silence, the story continues. Unwritten, unmeasured, yet endlessly unfolding. In stone and ice, in breath and memory, in you. Time forgets, yes, but in that forgetting, something profound endures. A rhythm, a pulse, a whisper between worlds. The same whisper that began this journey. The same one that calls us now, back into stillness. So as you rest, let the quiet hold you. Let the wind move softly through your thoughts. Let the earth breathe around you, its memory and its mystery intertwined. For even in its silence, it dreams. And within that dream, we find our place. Small, fleeting, infinite. Time forgets, and yet, through that forgetting, we learn to listen. to the silence between the years, where the earth still dreams.